The Toyota Highlander has long been a great choice for families looking for a reliable 3-row SUV that's reasonably sized. And this definitely still fits that bill. But does it do anything more than that? Stick with me and find out.
If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel so you can help me take this to the next level. Thank you. Now back to the review.
The front fascia reminds me of the new generation Toyota RAV4. I'm glad that they didn't go Avalon on this front end. There are 6 trims for the Toyota Highlander. Start off with the L, then you go to the LE, the Sporty XSE, which is based on the XLE, and then we step up to the Limited, and then the range-topping Platinum. Now, since this is the hybrid XLE trim, we do have a little blue badge denoting that hybrid powertrain.
The hybrid version is available on every trim except the L and the XSE.
Now, there is a new trim for 2021. That is the XSE trim. Unfortunately, I did not get to drive that one for today.
If you guys really want an XSE review, let me know and I'll try to pull some strings. Outside of the polarizing grille arrangement up front, the XSE looks pretty slick for a 3-row crossover. However, I'm more dazzled by how they physically tweaked the suspension and steering instead of just giving it the Ricer once-over. Quickly, I'd like to shout out Royal South Toyota in Bloomington, Indiana for loaning me the Highlanders used in this review. Royal Toyota is honest, respectful, and they pack some pretty cool cars. If you're interested in something new or used, check them out.
Ground clearance is a acceptable 8 inches behind the likes of the Subaru Ascent, but right there with the Volkswagen Atlas, which is good because you really need that when you're trying to go over curbs, which I've messed up in my past. Oh.
Poor judgment aside, I'd like to praise the Highlander for making LED headlights standard and giving LED fog lights to every model other than the base. All Highlanders outside of the XSE get the same assertive grille.
While this is purely subjective, I do appreciate the more bold but still reasonable front end of the Toyota Highlander.
While looking at the side of the new Highlander, you might notice that the silhouette doesn't look too different from the previous generation.
I will have to say I like the, for the most part, smooth lines that sharpen up here towards the rear end, complemented by this flat top headlight that gives it a little bit of a muscular look. Other things complementing the look are, of course, the spoiler and these roof rails, which will come on the XLE trim, but not the LE. There is this really weird, I don't know why they did, like almost like they were trying to do a floating roof, but then just half-assed it and didn't do anything at the back.
Unlike much of its competitors, the Highlander uses body cladding only in the areas more prone to damage. 18-inch alloys are standard, 20s come on the XSE, Limited, and Platinum.
Another big pro to me for the Highlander is the fact that it comes standard with proximity lock and unlock, something that is absent on most base models in the class. Now, at the rear of the 2021 Toyota Highlander, we have no tailpipes. Well, I mean, there is one, but it's facing down here, along with some smoked taillights. One thing that I definitely do appreciate, you get a power rear gate from the LE trim and up. Overall, I'm a fan of the exterior of the Highlander, but it doesn't push as many boundaries. It's not really a huge departure from the previous generation. The interior, though, is where it really improved. This being the XLE, you're going to get what Toyota calls Softex, which is really just their form of a vinyl leather material that's supposed to be durable, but also more luxurious. And I concur. I like the gray look. Everything really is also soft touch for the most part. Everything feels very natural where your hands rest, especially on the shifter. It's nice. And then also the touchscreen is not too far away. Now the actual unit itself, it's okay. It's leagues better than what Toyota has used in the past. It's still just slightly unintuitive for the most part, but nice thing is you have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which Toyota was slow to adopt. You also are going to get Amazon Alexa, which I don't have any Alexa things because I don't want Jeff Bezos in my living room. I do have to say that the 8-inch screen here is more than usable. You get a very high-tech, cool-looking 12.3-inch display if you step up to the Platinum. However, it is an option on the limited trim. Let's get back to materials and feel though. This here is kind of hard and weird looking, and I still had complaints about this with the previous generation. They've definitely refined it a little bit. It's softer now, but still not exactly plush.
Interior storage is strong in here, especially in that deep console that actually manages to hold a 40-ounce hydro flask. These cubbies are somewhat helpful, but they lack a grippy material, so your stuff will get slidey. The XLE standard wireless charger fits my S10 Plus, but not an iPhone 11 Pro Max with a case. It does keep your phone pretty secure. 8-way power seats are standard on the L and LE. They are also 8 passengers exclusively. Lumbar controls come on the heated Softex that my tester has. Most XSE models will have black Softex seats. For maximum race car though, you can get a red and black interior. Unfortunately, the seats don't offer any extra bolstering. The Limited and Platinum add ventilated leather seats, but only the most affluent will be able to choose the Platinum exclusive caramel seats. The Platinum is also a 7-passenger only.
You do have soft touch where your knee will rest on the door panel, along with soft touch where your elbow will rest. However, there's not soft touch here. For this class, that's pretty average. Now you do get this really nice leather steering wheel that comes on all trims except for the base L. But I really shouldn't talk down that base trim that much. You get push button start, you get tri-zone climate control, you get the 8-inch touchscreen. It's a pretty decent package if you ask me. Looking at the gauge cluster now, since this is the XLE, we're gonna have a 7-inch screen that's going to supplement information to us. We don't have a tachometer in here because this is a hybrid. The base trim is going to have a 4-inch unit, which is adequate. If you step up to the Platinum trim, you're gonna get a big heads-up display. Honestly, I'm fine with these gauges. I prefer the physical gauges in the Subaru Ascent to the ones that I find in here. These just look, like they may have been out of a Toyota made from like 2013. You also do get a dad mirror in here, but for some reason it doesn't like go up to the perfect position. It just sags a little bit.
To forget about their saggy mirror, Limited and Platinum buyers can indulge in their subwoofer-equipped 11-speaker JBL sound system. It's an option on the XSE, one that I might recommend, as the bass system doesn't stir much emotion like the bass systems on some Mazdas.
Overall, my impression of this is going to be a pretty positive one, mainly because I'm not bored in this interior. It looks kind of sporty, but modern. They paid attention to ergonomics, and they also, again, paid attention to materials. And I don't really see any buyers getting into this and being put off by anything. Now, when it comes to space, I am all right. Of course, I'm in the front seat of a 3-row SUV. I should be. But I'm going to set myself into a comfortable position, but not an excessive one, and see how I fit in the back. Keep in mind, I am 6'3". Now that I'm sitting by myself, I'm actually pleasantly surprised. Given that this is smaller than most of its competition, I still have actually room to spare when it comes to my knees. The seats are very, very nice and soft. They could have a little bit more support. You're gonna have soft touch materials here. You'll have a sunshade since this is the XLE trim. Along with standard tri-zone climate control. You're still gonna have the same 2 USB ports back here that you would on the Platinum and on the base. Now, headroom is where I'm like getting close, but still I clear.
For my height, this is decent. More than fine for 5th grade point guards, which is a demographic that might challenge the 3rd row of the Toyota.
The 3rd row of the Toyota Highlander is far from luxurious. This seat is not as far back as it can go. This would leave me just with enough room to squeeze by comfortably in the 2nd row. My head does not clear. My knees are like pressed into this, and this is of course just wood or whatever underneath. It's not a very forgiving material. And then the seats are flat and pretty low. They're not the worst. I think honestly the Honda Pilot isn't much better. The Mazda CX-9 certainly isn't better. And the Subaru Ascent is just a bit better. If you want size in this segment, go for a Volkswagen Atlas. But the Toyota Highlander 3rd row is for kids or adults in a pinch. But I will have to compliment it for at least giving people back here vents and the choice to recline their seat back to make for a it's not any better. All right, let's just get out of here. That was one of the more undignifying things that I've done this year. I can report it's not too big. 16 cubic feet back here if you care about frivolous numbers. And if you fold down these seats, you will have a more accommodating 48 cubic feet. Fold all of these seats flat, and you got about 84. I think the main constraint here is height. It's really not too tall back here. When you compare it to probably the Honda Pilot and just the Volkswagen Atlas, which is massive in all dimensions, this is gonna lack. Not to say that Toyota didn't do a good job with the space that they did have. In fact, I would say that this is still road trip worthy. If you got 3 kids, you could probably put one of these seats up. I think this space works just fine for what it needs to do. But whenever it comes down to building out a basement or something, you're probably gonna need to rent that truck at Menards. All right, now let's take this thing for a drive. The driving characteristics of the 2021 Toyota Highlander are arguably best in class. Now let's talk powertrains. What you're hearing there is a 2.5 liter naturally aspirated 4-cylinder. But of course, this is the hybrid, so it's supplemented with an electric motor that brings output up to 243 horsepower. It's not exactly an exciting figure. This powertrain is going to cost you an additional $1,400 on top of the regular V6. So, of course, that's the other option is the V6, which puts out 295 horsepower, and that's mated through an 8-speed automatic. This hybrid comes through a CVT only. Brake torque it. And 60. Kind of not what I was expecting there. You could really feel the all-wheel drive system being like, what the fuck is going on? I will have to note that the 4-cylinder does feel a little coarse higher up in the rev range. You can kind of feel a little bit of the vibrations from it. Not the most refined engine out there. The V6, however, is much more smooth and punchy. The V6 Highlander has a powertrain that is very reminiscent of everything else in the class. So the 8-speed automatic that's rooted up to this thing responds pretty well when you prompt it. Now, if you're just starting to slowly roll into the throttle, it is pretty reluctant to downshift. I wish it was just a little bit more ready to downshift. Even if you put it into its sport mode, if you're only rolling onto the throttle, it doesn't really react. Like, if you plan it, then it's like, oh, hey, it does have those 8 gears, so it really can get into the power band pretty quickly. And in that regard, I do like this transmission. The V6 itself, you kind of have to rev it out to really get the power. It's a direct injected and port fuel injected engine, just like the 2.5 liter that comes in the hybrid, which means that your intake valves will stay clean because they are at some points getting sprayed with fuel, making sure that there's no carbon buildup. So pro to Toyota for making your engines last longer and stay efficient for an increased amount of time. Now, honestly, if you were to tell me that this has 50 more horsepower than that hybrid, I probably wouldn't believe you. I think that hybrid, just because of that torque that comes in immediately, punches above its weight when compared to the V6. When you're driving around town, shifts happen in the background pretty seamlessly. When you really start getting on it, it's not the smoothest. You can tell this is not a transmission built for performance. It's built to be efficient, reliable, and when called upon, it reacts okay. All right, so 0 to 60 in the V6. Hey, this is definitely better than the hybrid 60. I honestly think that the hybrid punches above its weight class when you're not, at that 9/10 mark on power. Whenever you really start winding it out, the 295 horsepower comes into play, and you definitely notice it.
The hybrid provides a torque curve that is generally more useful around town than what's in the V6. The difference in power delivery is immense. The hybrid responds effectively in sport or normal mode and provides constant torque that doesn't really dip or peak like the V6. It does start to run out of steam at higher speeds. The top end power of the V6 shines through, but at 35 miles per gallon combined, I have a feeling most can overlook its drag race loss with the V6. It's also worth mentioning that the V6 is still super efficient for the class, and that the eco mode in the hybrid truly cripples the Highlander. You can't go wrong with either powertrain, but I can tell why the XSE is V6 only. The XSE Limited and Platinum V6 will feature Toyota's torque vectoring all-wheel drive. All that means is that it is able to effectively distribute rear power from side to side. It's a more sophisticated all-wheel drive system than what's found in other V6 models. The all-wheel drive hybrid just throws in an electric motor in the back. The gas models are not full-time all-wheel drive. When the front slip, the rear will wake up. For my research, the hybrid model is the same way despite it having a separate rear electric motor, but it was hard to find something conclusive here. I will link a video to the performance of the system in the hybrid RAV4, which has a very similar setup. It appears that the system lags behind in off-road capability compared to Honda's iVTM 4-wheel drive and Subaru's symmetrical all-wheel drive. Still, people say all of the Highlanders perform alright in snowy conditions with all-wheel drive, so I doubt anyone will have any big grievances here. I enjoyed how the Subaru Ascent drove because it absorbed most impacts pretty well, and I think the Highlander takes that up one more notch and adds in steering that's a bit more direct.
You know, it's not a sports car at all, but it does feel a little bit more reactive and tight. You do have sport modes that will slightly stiffen it up. If you want the ultimate from your steering, buy the XSE, because that will actually have a reworked steering rack that supposedly will make the handling just a little bit more quick. And I really don't have any complaints from this kind of vehicle around the back roads and through rough roads. Like, this is remarkably planted.
The Highlander is among the best vehicles I have ever driven in terms of absorbing impacts. Even the biggest imperfections with these 18-inch wheels don't transmit much into the cabin. It's softer than the Subaru Ascent or VW Atlas, yet body roll is far from nauseating. I would prefer more bolstering on the seats, especially on the XSE, which has a stiffer suspension and a thicker rear anti-roll bar to spice things up in your 3-row NA V6 SUV. While capable, the steering and the suspension feel withdrawn from the road, something that is standard for the class. I will say that the Atlas and CX-9 do a better job of drawing a connection between the driver and the road. I would expect the XSE with its enhancements to be a little more lively.
One of my biggest compliments to Toyota this time around is that this just feels like a more expensive vehicle behind the wheel. That's also due in part to the interior, definitely. That precise steering, the surprisingly capable suspension. I mean, it goes around corners pretty well, but it's also absorbing all of these bumps. And it doesn't have air ride, it doesn't have any kind of adaptive suspension, so you don't have the added complexities of those systems that might break down over time. Working alongside that smooth suspension are plush seats. They could offer a little bit more thigh support for taller drivers. You can't really tilt the seat bottom up as much as I'd want to, but I'm still more than okay in here. Now, when it comes to safety features, you're going to have Toyota's Safety Sense standard on every single one.
This includes things like adaptive cruise, forward collision mitigation, lane assist, and auto high beams, but you'll have to go to the LE for blind spot monitoring and rear cross traffic alert. Arguably the most important factor in Toyota purchases is reliability. And with an excellent record from Consumer Reports, Cars.com, and CarComplaints.com, the Highlander appears to be firmly at the top of the class in dependability and fights with the Ascent for best resale. Toyota hybrids are quite reliable, but after 10 to 12 years, the battery might start to become a question, something that's not an issue with the V6. But if reliability is a top concern, I would happily recommend any Highlander. And that's my concluding thought on the Highlander. It's just too damn easy to recommend. Is it the best choice in the class for all families? Well, no. I think that the segment is well filled, and claiming that one is just better than the rest would be ignorant. Many of these 3-row SUVs do a few things really well, so it kind of just depends if those few things line up with your priorities. For the Highlander though, it has a ton of mass appeal. The Toyota is more refined than ever. It's ultra smooth, quiet, modern, and motivated by competent powertrains. Wrap that up with the level of quality that has made Toyota a mainstay brand around the world, and you have a standout product. If you're looking for a 3-row SUV and don't mind a smaller interior and footprint, the new Highlander is well worth consideration. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.